The caffeine is in, the heart rate is up, and we are ready to go. Welcome back to the Extraordinary Podcast. I'm your host, Keanu Trujillo, founder of Alchemy Co-working. Alchemy is the process of taking the ordinary and turning it into something extraordinary. And on each of these episodes, we're talking about how to make something extraordinary from ordinary. And today we're focusing on interpersonal skills. Today we're focusing on skills that you use to develop relationships, to develop connection, to develop in your leadership. Soft skills. For those of you that don't know what soft skills are, communication, conflict resolution, negotiation, empathy. These are soft skills. And I spoke with a guy recently, said they're just skills, Keanu. They're just the skills that you need. But I also understand, I've met with enough business owners and leaders to understand that soft skills, these types of interpersonal skills, aren't sharpened and developed the way they should be. So today we're talking about taking an ordinary thought and turning it into something extraordinary by using a question. Ask a better question. But before you can ask a better question, we need to talk about asking more questions. Period. Just asking more questions. Do you ask enough questions? I want you to think about that for a moment. Or do you make more statements? The level of growth in your relationships, the level of growth in your business, in your job, whatever it may be that you're building, will I 100% guarantee that if you're making more statements than you are asking questions, then you are not anywhere close to reaching your potential or getting the best out of those around you. If you're asking more questions than you are making statements, then I promise you, you are closer and closer to that potential. And I can really empathize with this. Growing up and a lot of my military background, law enforcement, military, it was very direct. You're not asking a lot of questions. Now, I learned how to ask better questions as a police officer, getting to know a situation, a scenario, what happened, who's at fault. But at the same time, I would make a lot more statements than questions. I was very combative. I've always been a very intense type of person. So I know I made more statements. And I used to love hearing this. That's a really good point. I used to love hearing that. That's a good point. But then I started to realize and recognize something. When I made good points, it didn't affect change. And I'm the kind of person that really loves investing in people, pouring into people, spending time with people, helping them to grow and develop, especially from a faith standpoint. And there were a lot of people that I would coach or spend time with that would say, that's a really good point, but then wouldn't change anything. Nothing in their life would change, and it would frustrate me. And I started to realize there was something to that. People don't want to hear a point. People want to be heard. They want to be connected with. And that's what questions do. Now in my conversations, whether it be with peers or in passing with people that I'm building business with here at Alchemy or with my coaching clients, here's what I love hearing the most. This is when I know I'm striking gold. That's a good question. You should want to hear that more than that's a good point. That's a good question. If I can make you think deeper, right? If I can make you dig deeper, then that's a genuine connection because now, and I love that too. I love when someone asks a good question. I love being able to reciprocate that feeling and share with them. That's a good question because they're making me think deeper or think differently about something that maybe I wasn't quite there yet, or I wasn't seeing it from that perspective. And I'm so grateful for that. So before you can ask a better question, I want to challenge you to ask more questions. If there was only one thing that I could share, there's a couple of things that I usually trend towards, but this is one of them. If you do one thing or share one thing to make this world a better place, it would be that all people ask more questions and make less statements. Now, for those of you that are ultra driven, all of my clients are CEOs, entrepreneurs, business builders. They're very intense like I am. Here's one thing that I'll caution. When you ask questions, do not ask questions with a period at the end, right? Here's what that looks like. I told you how to do that, didn't I? I always affirm you in our communication, don't I? I over communicate whenever I'm communicating a plan, right? That's not a question. That's a statement with a question mark. And that does not create connection. As a matter of fact, it does worse than just making a statement because now you make someone to feel less than or that they don't understand. So ask more questions, make less statements, but make sure when you're asking those questions that they're not statements with a question mark. They're not rhetorical or condescending in that way. So once you start asking more questions, you're going to start to see this happen in your relationships. People will want to connect with you more. In your sales, they're going to want to connect with you more. Sales is a big part of, I think, why this was necessary for me to grow in asking more questions, because when I know the depth of where you're coming from, what you're looking for, what you're needing, what the real problem is, then I know that, okay, I can now deliver or create a proposal around what the real issue is. But there were so many times in my coaching or as I'm selling products that I can make good statements or I can get good statements, but then I submit the proposal and we're just not seeing eye to eye. It just wasn't clear. But when I ask good questions, I've gotten more business by asking a better question than I have by making a better statement. Right. And so for some of you that are in service, financial services, coaching, consulting, accounting, you're supposed to have all the answers, right? That's not true. You're supposed to be the person that knows how to ask the right question to get to the better answer. You may have the answer, and it may be, you have that experience that some situation specifically correlates with another one, but that's few and far between. You and your value is predicated on the better question that you ask, that you can ask a question that makes them think even deeper. For example, I was taking on a client one time that wanted to increase their recruiting. Right? We need to increase our recruiting. We need to be bringing more people through the front door. We need to broaden that net. We need to broaden that pipeline. We need to be bringing in double the amount of staff. And I asked, what's your attrition? How many people are you losing from the back door? And there was a pause on the call. We were on Zoom. So a couple of staff members thought, oh boy, he went there. And the CEO said, yeah, it's not good. So my question was, wouldn't you rather first plug the hole in the back door before you widen the front door? And they said, yes. And we worked together. We helped to solve the attrition problem. And as a matter of fact, we didn't have to increase the recruiting problem. Recruiting was doing great. What happened when we plugged that back door with the retention or the attrition and the loss? One, the employees that were there that were close to hitting that door saw the change, experienced the change, and became better employees, as well as those that we are now recruiting. Word starts to get out that the culture is shifting within the company, and recruiting didn't have to increase its efforts. As a matter of fact, recruiting could be even more effective with their efforts, which caused them or stopped them from experiencing burnout as well. All of that was from a better question. If I would have heard, we need to increase recruiting, and I would have just been hungry and had commission breath and said, okay, yeah, let's go and do that, I would have only been I would have only added to the problem, because we would have brought more people in, but we would have let more people out the back door. And that's not helpful. That will actually hurt a company more. I digress. We'll talk about recruiting and retention another time. Today, it's all about asking a better question. And I want to share some questions that help to shape our world. And I'm thinking about questions from a macro level, questions that have shaped the world that we live in today, but also thinking about it on a personal level and kind of zooming out and zooming in. So I spoke about the interpersonal skills of asking better questions with those that you're closest with, but now I want to zoom out on the world that we live in today and the kind of questions that shaped that. Thomas Edison, how can we harness electricity? Elon Musk, before founding PayPal, how do we make online payments faster, easier, and more secure? Mark Zuckerberg, how can we connect people digitally? Travis Kalanick and Garrett Camp from Uber, how do you scale transportation without owning any means of transportation? And Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak of Apple, how do you make personal computers available to everyone? Now today, that may not seem like a crazy question, but I want you to think about the time that these people were in when Thomas Edison said, how can we harness electricity? How crazy is that question, right? When Jeff Bezos said, how can we sell online? Each of you know someone has an aunt, an uncle, or a grandparent, or even a parent right now that still will not put their credit or debit card in a computer. Still to this day, only wants to pay cash, right? Now imagine 20, 30 years ago. What were they experiencing then to say, can we sell things online? That is a crazy question. Who's going to trust you? People aren't going to trust you. People don't trust the internet. The internet's a fad. That's a crazy question. Mark Zuckerberg, how can we connect people digitally? Digitally? Well, you can't connect people digitally. They have to be in person to connect, right? This is nuts. That's a crazy, crazy thought. One of my favorite ones, how do you scale transportation without owning any means of transportation? What do you mean? How do you cook without a kitchen? Right? How do you drive without a car? How do you scale transportation when you have no means of transportation? That is a crazy question. I really want you to think about and give that the weight that it deserves today, because in hindsight, it all seems so obvious. But at the time, what do you mean? Okay, let's even take that one a step further with Uber. How do you scale without any means of transportation? How do you trust someone to get in some random person's car that's not a taxi cab or an assigned car service? So you're saying just any random person can just go pick up any random person and drive them around and people are going to be okay with that, you're nuts. You're crazy. But it was a better question. And then Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak at the time, how do we make personal computers available to everyone? These questions could be crafted as statements and they wouldn't have gotten as far. We need to make personal computers available to everyone. Okay? Well, let's look at the next level beyond these CEOs and visionaries, right? Beyond these founders. How would their team have responded to that? We need to make personal computers available to everyone. Period. Statement. All right, well, we better go figure that out. How do we make these available? Now it opens up the door to possibility for every person that's in the company to say, I'm looking, I'm seeking, I'm finding it. I'm understanding that I am responsible for answering that question. It opens up conversation where statements and conversations, periods and a sentence. Question marks demand a response. I know that this is elementary. My wife's a third grade teacher and she's teaching this to her students right now, but we as adults and as professionals need this lesson. Periods and sentences, questions demand a response, right? So asking these questions opens up the whole company to how do we do that? How do we make personal computers available to everyone? Make personal computers available to everyone. How do you scale transportation without owning any means of transportation? Scale transportation without owning any vehicles. Okay. Connect people digitally. How do we connect people digitally? Questions, asking a better question will get you further than 10 statements. Personally and high level with your vision. When you're thinking about your company, I have a friend now, on the last podcast, I talk about Brittany. I'm not talking about Brittany. They're not the same Brittany, but I have a friend, shout out Brittany, who owns and just founded the Wishing Well NC. The Wishing Well NC is a mobile bar service, and she is asking a better question, right? How do I create an experience around the bar scene without owning a physical bar, right? How do I create an experience for people without the ABC restrictions, for those of you not in North Carolina, for the Alcohol Board Commission restrictions? How do I do that? She's asking a better question. How do I get started? She went and bought an old horse trailer and she's totally revitalizing that now, right? How? Asking a better question in your business, asking a better question of yourself. Am I built for more? Am I satisfied with what I'm doing? I'm not built for more. I just have to be satisfied with what I'm doing. Am I built for more? Should I be doing more? Can I be doing something else? Can I be doing more with my life, with my skill sets, with my talents, with my interests? Ask even questions of yourself. And then, of course, in your relationships, ask a better question. Next time you're in an argument with your spouse, this is free marriage coaching. You're welcome. Ask a question when they're upset. Ask a question. And ask another question. And when you feel like you've asked enough questions, ask one more question to really get to the bottom of what's going on, to really get to the bottom of the issue. When you're speaking with an employee or you're speaking to your supervisor, ask one more question. Not a statement, ask a question. A question demands curiosity. A question demands empathy, because I genuinely want to know what you're experiencing, where you're coming from, what's happening in your world. A statement closes the conversation. You make a statement, I make a statement. You make a statement, I make a statement. And that's the division that we have in this world today. And I know it's been hard for every generation, but I don't think that our country has ever been more divided than it is today. And more questions in your own 3 feet of space helps to, one by one, create more connection and less division. So today, ask a better question. Before you ask a better question, you have to be willing to ask more questions. Questions, not statements. Questions, not statements, with question marks. And watch your relationships, your business, your goals, your role start to grow and start to flourish. We'll see you next time.